Welcome to Speak Life with Dr. Amy Chai. Information for your best life. Now, here's Amy Chai.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Speak Life. Today, we're going to talk about a topic that we've all had experience with, and that topic is insomnia. Now, I want everybody to grab their blankie and their plushie toy, and we're going to learn a little bit about insomnia, how to beat it, how to treat it. Okay, so what is insomnia? Well, in the medical world, we have two types of insomnia. And the first type of insomnia is called sleep maintenance insomnia, which is where you keep waking up at night or you don't sleep all the way through the night. And the other type of insomnia is called sleep onset insomnia, where you can't quite get to sleep at night. And some people have both the sleep onset and the sleep maintenance types of insomnia together. And as you can imagine, when they get up in the morning, they do not feel rested at all. And it's a terrible feeling to feel as though you have not slept well. It can be very distressing to people. But what causes it? What causes so much insomnia in our modern world? Insomnia is a very common problem, and so many people come to my office seeking relief from insomnia. So why is it so common? Well, it's really interesting to learn about a topic called chronobiology. And chronobiology is the study of how time affects our body. Now, people have for thousands of years grown up with a cycle of sunrise and sunset. And every single cell in our body has gotten adjusted to the cycle of our planet as it rotates on its journey around the sun. So in 2017, this field of chronobiology got a huge boost with the Nobel Prize for the people that discovered how our cells know what time it is. So every single cell in your entire body knows what time it is. Every cell is in tune with the natural world all around us. But guess what isn't in tune with the natural world around us? That's right, the modern life. Our modern life is very different than it was 100 years ago. So let me just bring up a slide that shows a little bit about the differences that we had 100 years ago compared to today. So I'm calling this the disease of modern life. And this disease of modern life creates a barrier between our bodies and the way we're designed to function and the actual expression of that function because of the way our society has grown up to be very, very unnatural. So think about 100 years ago. 100 years ago, we did not have an artificial environment in people's homes. We didn't have central heating. We didn't have central air conditioning. But now everything we do is in an artificial environment. We may not even go outdoors the entire day. We may go into our cars, go into a parking garage, go into work, then drive back home, maybe drive into our garage, go back into our house, and not even set foot outdoors. So we now live inside of an artificial world. The worst part of the artificial world for us, physiologically speaking, is actually the artificial lighting. And artificial lighting is very, very harmful for us. because if you think about 100 years ago, that would have been 1923. The vast majority of homes in the United States didn't have any connection to an electrical grid at all. So by the time, let's see, 1935 rolled around, you had about 70% of homes attached to the grid. And, they'd have some lights, and perhaps they'd be able to plug in a few things. But we really didn't have a lot of electrical devices in the home, and most people weren't even attached to the electrical grid 100 years ago. We didn't have 24/7 availability of food. In fact, we didn't have refrigerators. Refrigerators in my grandmother's day were actually ice boxes, and they'd actually get a piece of ice and they'd actually put it in a box. And that was what my grandmother used to keep food fresh. And my father actually was a milk truck driver for a while, where they actually brought bottles of cold milk to your house because people didn't have refrigerators. And so there's no lights, there's no refrigerator. Um, how are you going to get food 24/7? Well, you're not. As soon as it gets dark outside after dinner, you're not going to eat anything, not again, right? It's just going to be, you're done. There wasn't alcohol available 100 years ago. In fact, 100 years ago, it was in the middle of prohibition, which went from 1920 to 1933. So there wasn't alcohol. You couldn't have a couple glasses of wine at night while watching a movie. Um, we didn't have a 24/7 work cycle 100 years ago. It got dark, people just simply went to bed. They didn't have constant phone calls, they didn't have texts, they couldn't stay up on their computer completing their work until 1 or 2 in the morning. That just didn't happen. 100 years ago, there were no TVs, there were no cell phones. You couldn't lie in bed watching TV or using your phone. And people, they actually worked outdoors. They did chores. Everyone did chores. Most people weren't sitting on their behinds all day. So actually, by the time you got to bedtime, you were actually physically tired. And then, there weren't a lot of drugs. That everyone takes drugs now. And I don't mean like illicit substances. I mean just medications. Now everyone's on a bunch of medications too. So 100 years ago, our bodies were so much more in touch with how they're supposed to be. But that's not the case anymore. It's a very, very different time. So what we have now is people living in a society, living in a world that is absolutely not adapted to how our bodies were designed to function. And that's one of the big reasons why there is so much insomnia, because our cells know what time it is. Every single cell in your body is designed to live in a very, very different world than the world we're living in today. And that's a big problem. So next I want to talk about some of the medical problems that we have and how those cause insomnia as well. One of the big problems that we see a lot of these days is depression. Now, it's very common for depression, either you sleep too much, or you can't sleep at all. But the inability to sleep at night or waking up very early in the morning is a common symptom of depression. Another medical condition that we often see is called sleep apnea. And if you're waking up a lot at night, if you have like a gasping and you wake up, or you feel like you have a headache in the morning, when you wake up and you're kind of groggy, it's possible that you have sleep apnea. And that's more common as we get older, and as we put on a little bit of weight, it's more common still. Another cause of medical problems and insomnia is actually menopause. And menopause causes a lot of physical changes and a lot of brain changes too. And it's very common to have problems with insomnia during menopause. Um, Another one that you probably know a lot about is anxiety disorders. When people have their mind going, and the mind just won't shut off because there's all these worries, these anxieties coming through. And of course, PTSD, that's where people have actually a fear of going to sleep because they're afraid one of those traumatic nightmares is going to wake them up and they're going to be having that fight or flight reaction, palpitations, anxiety, hypervigilance, and that's going to come on with PTSD. Another cause of insomnia is substance abuse. The consistent use of almost any substance, be it alcohol or cannabis or street drugs, whatever it is, can cause problems with insomnia if used frequently or regularly. And almost all of my patients with addiction problems suffer from insomnia. Another one, of course, is chronic pain. People can't seem to get comfortable in bed. Their neck hurts, their back hurts, they have restless legs. It's really hard to get to sleep because of the pain. That's a common one. And then, of course, old age. The old age causes some conditions like perhaps you have to urinate a lot at night, or, you know, you have a lot of arthritis pains, or all those other medical conditions you're more likely to have in old age. But again, your body actually also needs less sleep in old age. So all of that together combines to make old age a time where sleeping is difficult. And you'll notice that I put here on this picture, I put a sign that has like a circle rolling around. And what that's going to remind me to say to you right now is these medical problems that you have, they tend to interact to make your insomnia worse. But then your insomnia fights back and actually makes your medical conditions worse as well. Because if you have pain, if you have depression, if you have PTSD, they cause insomnia. But then when you can't sleep, the inability to sleep actually makes these problems worse. So you get this vicious cycle of one making the other worse and then the other coming back and making the other one worse. So one of the things you want to look at is getting some of these medical conditions treated. And getting also the insomnia treated at the same time, and you're going to work together, because if you treat both the insomnia and the medical condition together, what you're going to find is that you're going to improve both at the same time. So, the next thing I want to talk about really quickly here is how do we fight back from insomnia before we go to the doctor? Okay, because I want you to know there are things that you can do at home for insomnia that's going to help you a lot. Okay. And one of those things is actually cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. Um, Now, you can actually do CBT at home with a couple of little tricks, and I'm going to give you a CBT trick, okay? You know how you always, like, if you can't go to sleep, you look at the clock and you're like, oh no, it's late. It's like, if I go to sleep now, I'll have 7 hours. If I go to sleep now, I'll have 6 hours. If I go to sleep now, I'll have 5 hours. No, um, don't think that way, because that type of thinking actually makes your insomnia worse. So, one of the quick tips and tricks for cognitive behavioral therapy is to have a little notebook by the side of your bed. You can pick it up and you can write down what's causing the anxious thoughts in your mind. Now, say you're thinking about, I won't feel well tomorrow. then you think, okay, maybe I won't get as much sleep tomorrow, but that's okay. And you allow yourself to feel that feeling. You allow yourself to process that feeling. You write it down and then you put it aside. And putting it aside in that notebook sort of symbolically takes it out of your mind. And that works the same way for like anxious thoughts. Like if you're in bed and all of a sudden your eyes pop up and you're like, oh my gosh, tomorrow I have to do something I'm really anxious about. And you can't stop thinking about it and just like rolls around in your head. Take the notebook and start writing in it. Say, tomorrow I need to do this. And it's like, okay, I can't do anything else about it right now. Close the notebook, put it down. And those are a couple little cognitive behavioral tricks. They also have cognitive behavioral therapy apps that you can get for your telephone, and it's very useful. It's just another way of sort of psyching yourself out. Or if you have a therapist, you can work on cognitive behavioral therapy with a therapist. Another thing you're going to want to do is to not eat any food or drink before you go to bed, and that includes alcohol and water, and no food before bed. And so give it like 2 to 4 hours before you go to sleep, trying not to eat before bed, and that's going to help you sleep better. And it'll also help if you have heartburn or anything else like that. It's also going to help that as well. Sleep hygiene is another thing. Now, what is sleep hygiene? Well, it's using science to do the best practices for falling asleep in bed. And what are the best practices for falling asleep? Well, the first thing is the environment in the room around you. Now, a cool room is very important. You do not want a hot environment. So keeping it around 65 is actually a good temperature. Make sure your feet are warm though. So maybe you could wear fuzzy socks, but keep the temperature cold. But having a cool environment around you, and then have then have covers as needed, is the best way to fall asleep. As for your covers, some people do better with a weighted blanket, especially if they have some anxiety disorders. Sometimes the weighted blanket can be very calming. Another thing important for sleep hygiene in your environment is to make sure that you have a quiet environment. If you have noisy neighbors, if there's barking dogs, if there's sirens, if there's a television blaring in the next room, it's hard to fall asleep. So earplugs or sound noise canceling headphones, or a white noise machine, anything that's going to block that sound is going to be important. And the other thing, of course, you want the room to be dark. You should not leave the TV running. You should allow it to be dark and quiet inside your space. So that's the environment that you need for the sleep hygiene. What else about sleep hygiene is important? Well, um, the first and most difficult thing is to set a time to go to sleep and a time to wake up and stick to it. If you need 8 hours of sleep, make it like 10 o'clock to bed, 6 o'clock to wake up, and do it every day. And that's going to set your body on a rhythm. Your body loves to be on a rhythm, a sleep wake cycle. And it doesn't like waking up at different times and going to bed at different times. It messes the body up. So try to keep the bedtime at the same time, the wake up time at the same time. The other thing, and this is hard for me, is no naps. Napping during the day is going to mess you up. So no napping. Okay, no napping. So you want to be tired by the time you get to bed. So if you take a nap, you're not going to be tired. So same bedtime, same wake up time, no naps. And if you do find that you can't go to sleep, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to get up, get out of bed, do something else for a while, and then go back to bed instead of sitting there and stressing about it and thinking about it over and over. So that's how you how you escape that little trap. Okay. Um, so the other thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to be active during the day. And exercise is, in fact, one of the best ways to combat insomnia because your body is actually designed to do work during the day and to rest at night. And if you don't do any work during the day, if you're just sitting on the couch or sitting at your desk, it's going to be a lot harder to, you know, feel tired and sleepy at night because you really haven't done anything to tire yourself out. So going outside and exercising, if you have a dog, walk your dog. Even if you could just walk around the neighborhood, those type of things are good for you and will help your insomnia. Um, and finally, another thing to help your insomnia is actually light therapy. Remember what I said about every cell in our body is in tune with nature? Well, how our body is in tune with nature is the light and dark cycle of our earth, that 24-hour cycle. Our body wants that 24-hour cycle, and it wants to have light and dark. And one of the things that helps you wake up in the morning is a natural alarm that actually turns on with light in the morning. You can actually purchase alarm clocks that slowly um, bring light into the room, much like a natural sunrise. And then it can actually, at the time when you're supposed to wake up, it can start to have bird sounds. And that will really help your body think that you're experiencing sun. Another type of light therapy is just to go outside and actually experience sunlight in the morning. There's a lot of things that you can get for light therapy that you can purchase just off the internet or just going outdoors, taking a walk in the sun in the morning. Because remember, if you couldn't do it 100 years ago, you probably shouldn't be doing it now. Like you shouldn't be lying in bed with your cell phone. You shouldn't be staying up all night, shift work, never going outdoors, never seeing the sun. Those things are messing up our bodies. So if you're thinking in terms of how you were living 100 years ago versus how you're living now, that sort of gives you a good idea of what sleep hygiene is all about. It's actually about returning your body to the natural rhythms that it is designed to experience over the millennia as our bodies developed harmony with the natural world. So, what if that doesn't work? And it might not work, okay? So, I'm going to go over here a brief overview of what I call the last resort. The last resort is drug therapy, okay? So, we really don't want to take drugs. We don't want to. It's not good for us. It's not good to use sleeping medications long term. If you're going to use sleep medications long term, I strongly advise that you only do it under the supervision of a sleep specialist. And by a sleep specialist, I don't mean just your primary care doctor. I mean a sleep specialist who does a sleep study, talks to you about what's available, and helps you decide what medication to use. But any kind of sleep aid should really not be taken long term. And that's what I really want to drive home as a point. They're not meant to be taken long term, they're just meant for occasional use. So let's talk first about melatonin. Melatonin's over the counter, it's very popular. It isn't really a sleeping pill, it's a hormone. it doesn't really put you to sleep. It just helps you adjust to the natural hormone that your body would have had and help you to sleep at a certain time. Like, it's very good for jet lag, it's very good for shift work, melatonin, and it's also good for older age people and people maybe with certain behavioral disorders, like autism. Maybe their body just simply is not producing enough of the hormone melatonin. So that's also something you would want to talk to your doctor about. Um, Z drugs. Z drugs are very common. They're like your typical Ambien type of a drug that you've heard of. I really don't ever like to prescribe these drugs. Why? Because they can cause weird problems like sleepwalking. And it's impossible for me to tell if you're going to be one of those people that gets sleepwalking from their medication. But if you do, it could be very dangerous. Like, you could be on the stairs sleepwalking and you could like fall down the stairs. So I really don't like Z drugs. But if you do use them, just use them briefly. Okay. Orexin inhibitors. There's only one on the market. I think it's called Belsomra, and that's good for both sleep onset and sleep maintenance. And it's an orexin inhibitor. I think it's safer than the Z drugs. Again, you'd want to talk to your doctor about that. Our old standby, of course, the benzodiazepines. Those are good for temporary use if say you're something bad happened in your family, there was a death in the family, you're very stressed out. A short course of benzodiazepines is fine, but it is definitely not for long-term use. Antidepressants. You may have depression, or you may just need an antidepressant to help you sleep, and they're commonly used for sleep aids. But antidepressants tend to be safer, and you can usually use them long-term. Medications like trazodone, for example, are commonly used for sleep disorders. And if you actually have depression, treating the depression might also help you sleep better as well. Right now, we have a lot of people using cannabis for sleep. There's like indica and there's sativa. Both of these types of cannabis are sometimes used, usually the indica for pain and relaxation. And those are okay for temporary use. But if you use they do improve the duration and quality of sleep for people for a short time. The drawbacks are that if you use it long term, you can build a tolerance and you can start having problems with your memory. And again, you can have rebound, and then eventually you can actually develop insomnia from using it too much or using it every day and starting to get the tolerance. So cannabis, I think, could be used, especially if you have PTSD. But beware, it has some side effects. It shortens your REM sleep, so you don't dream as much, which might be good for PTSD. But again, that may shorten the quality or the depth of your sleep if you use it long term. So I would, for cannabis, it could be used, but I would say only for short-term use, not for long-term use, just like all the rest of these drugs. Antihistamines, you've probably seen it like ZQuil or whatever. Those can be used once or twice, but you should not use those over the counter like Tylenol PM, for example, because they can contribute, if you use them every day, they can contribute to problems with your mental functioning over time, and they can give you dry mouth and other symptoms. So that's just a summary of insomnia, what it is, how to treat it. I hope that was helpful for you. And I hope you have a great night's sleep tonight. So come back next time and we'll talk to you again on Speak Life New Haven. Speak Life New Haven. And everyone have a great night's sleep. And we'll see you later.
Tune in next time for Speak Life with Dr. Amy Child at ctpolitics.tv.